All right, Class A, what do we still need to know about reflexive verbs? Well, first of all, we never talked about the fact that reflexive verbs are actually a type of pronominal verb. These verbs are any verbs that are conjugated with the pronouns me, te, se, nos, os, and se. And there are a few different types of them. First are the reflexive verbs, which we already know, and all of the information about them is on our pink, some of you it's purple, reflexive verb sheet. There's another type of pronominal verb, which are reflexive reciprocal verbs, where the action involves two or more people doing something to or for each other. But then there are also non-reflexive pronominal verbs, which we will be talking about, and there are some non-reflexive verbs that change their meaning when they are used with those reflexive pronouns. So in a second here, I'm going to show you two screens that are yellow in the background. You do not have to write down this information because it's already on your pink sheets. You just need to pay attention to review because all of that basic information relates to what we are talking about with the other types. Alright, so what do you already know about reflexive verbs? Well, on your pink sheet on the back, it says how do you recognize them? Well, when they're in the infinitive form, they end in se. Why are verbs reflexive? Well, in the past, they were reflexive because we were dealing with actions that dealt with someone doing something to him or herself. We're going to be learning some other types of reflexive verbs now, but that was what they were before. And how do you conjugate them? Well, you follow these 4 steps. And on the front of your pink sheet, we had a list of 23 verbs where the actions are mostly done to oneself. There are some that are mental states, for example, number 21, to feel, and it used to throw some people off because they thought it had to be to feel oneself, but that wasn't the case, and we'll find out why. Because sometimes verbs are reflexive just because they deal with mental or emotional states. Alright, so I've highlighted a few of them here from the front of your pink sheet because I was looking at which ones your book uses the most, and it is the ones that I've highlighted. So while you don't have to have all of these verbs memorized, the ones that are highlighted you'll probably see throughout this unit. Okay, so that's just a review of your pink sheet. Let's move on to what you do need to continue writing down. We need to talk about reflexive reciprocal verbs. So these are verbs that I will call to each other verbs. They look just like reflexive verbs, but instead of it being an action one does to oneself, 2 or more people do the action to or for each other. And you can pretty much take any non-reflexive verb and turn it into a to each other verb as long as it makes sense. For example, we know that to help in Spanish is ayudar. And if you want to make it to help each other, you just have to make it reflexive. And that works. Many reflexive verbs can also be used as reflexive reciprocal verbs. That's what that RR stands for. I'm just helping you guys abbreviate your notes a little bit, but not all of them. For example, afeitarse la cabeza, if I go back to my pink sheet, afeitarse means to shave. So afeitarse la cabeza as a reflexive verb means to shave one's head. And in the past, we learned the verb morirse, which is to die, and these are reflexive verbs. If we change them into reflexive reciprocal verbs, let's see if they make sense. So instead of to shave one's head, as a reflexive reciprocal verb, a to each other verb, it would be to shave each other's heads. I imagine it would probably be a little bit difficult to shave your own head, even though Britney Spears did it, so it might be easier if 2 people did it to each other. But if I want to take morirse and see if it works as a reflexive reciprocal verb, what would that mean? To die each other? That one doesn't really make sense. So, as long as things make sense, you can do this. Some other things we need to know. Sometimes, because they do make sense, you can only tell if a verb is reflexive or reflexive reciprocal depending on context. For example, these 2 sentences here use the verb mirar, which if you remember from your direction words means to look at. And so this is saying that the girls look at blank in the mirror. Chances are what do girls do with mirrors? They look at themselves. Or in this sentence, las chicas se miran cuando se hablan, the girls look at blank when they talk to blank. Now this one, maybe girls are getting ready together in a bathroom, and it would make more sense to say the girls look at each other when they talk to each other. Again, either of these would work and make sense. Sometimes you need a little more context or a little more clarity. It's just something to think about. So, to show you understand the lesson, from now on you must say to, for, or with each other with reflexive verbs as long as it makes sense. If it doesn't make sense, like up here with morir say, then don't say it. But to show that you understand that reflexive verbs are sometimes to each other verbs, I want you to get in the habit of that for now. What else do we need to know? Well, we need to know how to conjugate reflexive reciprocal verbs. Because at least 2 or more people are involved, only use the plural or the right side of the conjugation chart. And they can be used in any tense. So, for example, the verb ver, which means to see or watch, is now being used reflexive reciprocally. So that means to see, or weird, to watch each other. So, since at least 2 people are involved, we don't need this side of the chart. That's why I've got it grayed out. You only need the right-hand side of the chart to say we see each other, you guys see each other, or they or you guys see each other. And it can be used in any tense. So if I want to say that we saw each other yesterday, I would use it in the preterite. Or if I want to say we used to see each other on the weekends, I would use the imperfect. And again, since 2 or more people are involved, I only need the right-hand sides of the chart to say we do it to each other, you guys do it to each other, or they do it to each other. And also normal pronoun placement rules apply. So in this sentence here, I've got my subject, nosotros, and I've got my verb phrase, vamos a ver, we are going to see. And if I want to say each other, I need the pronoun nos. And I can put my pronoun in front of vamos because it's a conjugated verb, or down here, I can attach it at the end of ver because ver is an infinitive, and you can attach pronouns at the end of an infinitive. Alright, so now you know what they are and you know how to conjugate them. Let's look at a few examples that your book will be using. Most of these are already vocab. They've just taken it from to support to now to support each other, or they're from our yellow sheet. So we've had a lot of these before, but I think odiarse and pelearse might be new or relatively new. So you want to make sure that you're making note of everything and you don't forget to study your notes along with your note cards. All right, so what else do we need to know? We need to know about non-reflexive pronominal verbs. So remember, pronominal verb is any time it ends in say in the infinitive, and we have to use mete, say, no, so, say. Reflexive means that the action reflects back upon the subject. So either we do something to each other or I do something to myself, but these are not truly reflexive nor reciprocal, and they usually refer to people's actions, nope, not actions, emotions or changes in condition. For example, these here. So remembering something, worrying about something, that's an emotional or mental state, and a lot of times you use a reflexive verb to talk about that. Or if you want to talk about when a process happens to a subject that's not a person, for example, a door might just open or close on its own, or a room might get cold, and these things sort of just happen to the subject, and they're usually not people. And when that happens, you use what we would traditionally call a reflexive verb, but we now know is a pronominal verb. And here are the examples that you need to know because the book will be throwing them around to help you practice these concepts. So they're as important as vocab. And we've got one more thing we need to know about pronominal verbs, and it is this: that there are many verbs that change their meanings if used with reflexive or pronominal pronouns. For example, you may remember that dormir means to sleep, but dormirse means to fall asleep. That's what we mean here. If we take any of these verbs that we should already know, except for maybe a couple, like to learn, to drink, to eat, to sleep. If we make them reflexive or we use them with mete, say, no, so, say, they change their meaning. And we need to be aware of which ones do that. So again, here are some more verbs that we need to be studying to do well in the upcoming unit. Thanks for taking your notes. Good job. I appreciate your time and effort. Hasta luego.